Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you all had a great Christmas and a great holidays and all that good stuff. And as you can tell, I'm still battling a cold. Maybe one of these days I'll be over it. I don't know. But in this video, I have 6 encounters that I really found strange. And I think you will too. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. This is something that occurred when I was 16 years old. I used to be afraid of stuff at night, but I eventually grew out of that and could now sleep in the dark. I was living out in the middle of nowhere in Utah. Now most nights it's super chill, especially out by the campfire, and this particular night that's what I was doing. I was sitting out by the campfire. So it was just me and my folks. Eventually, they go to bed. So I started just looking at stars because they're really clear out there and they're really beautiful. I was just enjoying the beauty and getting sleepy. Eventually, I find myself drifting off and closing my eyes. And then suddenly, I feel like something's watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck begin to stand on end. Usually in this situation, my instinct is to look in the direction of wherever this feeling is coming from. But in this particular time, I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I didn't want to. I felt scared of what I might see or what I might find. Instead, I stand up and just go inside. And on the way, I hear a twig snap, like a single twig, and then there's dead silence. I freeze to make sure that I can hear everything. I feel like a deer getting hunted. I still feel like I'm being watched, and I'm still listening for anything spooky to happen. I continue walking toward my house, trying to move silently so I can still hear noises, but there's nothing to be heard. About halfway to the house, the feeling takes over, and I take off in a sprint, and I get through the door. I turn around and lock the sliding door, and then I look and see if there was anything out there. I can't see anything, except trees. I calm down a bit. I go to bed. I'm up in my room, and I'm still very curious as to what made that snapping noise. I get up and look out my bedroom window, over towards the bonfire area and what's left of the fire. And then I notice something. There's something down there. This hulking figure that's black, with really long arms, seems to be inspecting the area. I pull out my old phone to try and take a picture, but the flash goes off. This thing immediately turns its head toward me and has massive eyes. After staring each other down for what felt like ever, but was probably only about 10 seconds, I just closed my window, closed the blinds, and just went back to bed. Back when I was in the Marine Corps, we would be stalked by these Bigfoot-like creatures at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It didn't matter how many of us were out there. We were armed with rifles and no ammo and or blanks during field ops. They would pick up whatever trash or snacks we would drop. We sometimes could see their eyes in the tree line and see random glimmers of shadows through our night optics. But you can see outlines and or someone's figure. We would hear knocks or rustling throughout our nights around Verona Loop training grounds or on Camp Lejeune. Many of us who spent time in the infantry spent about 45 to 60% of the year in the woods. You could hear them at night. One night, I was doing patrol ops in the woods and hills, and we decided to take a pause. It was around 3 a.m., and we were taking a nap break. It was during a war game, and I was on watch with one of my buddies. Holding security, we saw an outline in the woods, and meanwhile, we were sleep deprived, not thinking that we were seeing real things in the tree line, until we spoke to each other to confirm that what we were seeing through our nods. Pebbles were being thrown at us, and we were confused. Thinking that we were about to be run up on by Op 4, we slowly wake up our other guys, thinking that we're about to be ambushed. Turns out, we were being stalked. We decided to get into defensive positions, and the rocks kept coming. We were thinking that we were being messed with by the advisors, running around overwatching the war game. We checked on the radio to see if there were any nearby. There were none at all, so we thought it was Op 4. We opened up with blanks, but as we opened up, we saw a massive creature, and another one, 25 to 30 meters away. The creatures knocked over a semi-thin tree and gave a deep growl, something that would shake guys who were desensitized and not really scared by anything. When daylight came, we circled back to look, and we found huge footprints. We were so confused and shaken. After that situation, we didn't know how to explain what we saw or experienced. That night, I became an actual believer. I was always skeptical about Bigfoot or any creature like it being out there in the woods. This was years ago, and to this day, I struggle to go into deep woods. So I grew up on a farm in southeastern Pennsylvania. It was kind of a half farm, half family airstrip, basically a decent-sized farm surrounded on all sides by dense woods. And when this occurred, I was still pretty young. I had just gotten my first rifle. It was a Marlin 60 that, at that time, I just played with constantly. It was late fall, so pretty much everything is dead. All the leaves have all fallen down from the trees, and it gets really dark out. I was just screwing around with my rifle as usual when I should have been doing chores. There was an almost full moon that was low in the sky over the horizon, and walking back from this building that we call the hangar to the house, I hear a commotion coming from the chicken coop. My thought is, that damn fox is at it again. But this time, I decided that if I got the fox, if I snuck up on it, and I shot the fox rather than scaring it off like usual, I'd be some kind of superhero. Everybody would be proud of me for doing something good like this. So I was creeping up around the pen to get a better view, my eyes pointed toward the ground, and then I noticed some movement out of my peripheral vision. I look up towards the tree line about 200 yards away, and I see the silhouette of something massive walking upright, parallel with the tree line outlined by the moon. It looks nothing like a bear. It's too tall, much too tall. It's lanky looking almost. It has an elongated head. The best I can describe the head shape is the silhouette of one of those Texas longhorn skulls you see in the desert. I was frozen, just watching this thing. It covered a good amount of distance in about 4 seconds. Then it stops, sniffs the air, and starts to look around. Very quickly, its eyes fall to me. I was so terrified that I dropped my gun, and then I sprinted as fast as my little kid legs would carry me back inside. I buried my face into the couch and cried. The next day, my dad, after scolding me about leaving the gun out there, took me outside to go get the gun and maybe find out if there was a logical explanation for what I saw. We get to the chicken coop, and we find that both of our hens are missing. The wire mesh has been pulled away from the coop itself. It wasn't super well attached, but you'd have to have some intelligence and know what you're doing to pull the fence away like that. After this, we go over to the tree line where I said I saw the thing, and I point to this forked limb of a tree that the thing from last night stopped at. Later on, Dad measures it to be roughly 13 feet. It's been many years since then, and to this day, I have no clue what I saw that night, and my dad was just as perplexed all these years as well. My dad has a few interesting stories about the woods. He was an avid outdoorsman, always in the woods, hunting, offloading, etc. So this was back in the 1970s, the late 70s to be exact. Him and his friends are offloading in his Jeep one night, way up in the mountains. They begin to sense that something is off about the woods around them, so they stop. They notice that there's extremely strong winds moving in the trees in a whirling motion, and then they see lights off in the distance. It's a remote area that they've been to a bunch of times beforehand, but they decided to walk over and to check it out. They came upon what looked like to be a group of cabins from the 1920s to the 1930s. Pristine trucks from that time and era were in front of each cabin, lanterns hanging outside of each cabin that were recently lit. They knock on one of the doors. There's no response, so they go into the cabin. The door is unlocked. The cabins look brand new inside, but no recent technology. They also look like they've been recently inhabited, but there's nobody around. They leave the area and go home for the night. The next day, they read in the newspaper, and one of the headlines is about strange lights in the sky being seen over the mountain that they were on. They go back up that night to that same area. There's no cabins. He always maintained that this was one of the strangest things that he's ever experienced in his life and has no explanation for it. I have a story about something from around Washington called the Batsquatch. I saw it in Ape Caves near Mount St. Helens. I'm from Seattle. I was hiking with two friends, my girlfriend and her friend. Myself, being a bit of an enthusiast, had a Kimber 1911 in 45 on me. Me and one of my friends are former Boy Scouts, and we went pretty far into it too, so we generally know how to prepare for stuff. Ape Caves is an 8-mile-long stretch of giant caves. We all had headlamps and flashlights. My girl had my lantern. We were probably only 2 miles in when we heard several loud, inhuman screeches. The cave is pretty cold year-round, and this was the middle of January, so it was really cold there. We had the whole place to ourselves. Whatever made that sound wasn't another human. We were all scared shitless. We all had our knives out. I held back on pulling my gun because I wasn't entirely sure if we were about to get brutally murdered or not. And then my friend pointed out something that was moving on top of the cave. It was just hanging there, almost like a cocoon. And then I saw 2 eyes that were reflecting off of our lights. It spread its wings and violently flapped down in front of us, and then we all panicked. Everyone but me ran away, screaming, tripping, and falling at some point. All the while, I screamed a variety of curse words, trying to draw my pistol. The thing lunged toward me as I opened fire. Only 2 of the 4 rounds I fired hit, because I was in straight-up panic mode myself. I ducked, and it went right over me and kept going. I fell backwards and tried to hit it more, but it pulled up too quick for me to shoot. It looked at least a little bit injured though. I hurried to catch up with the rest of the group. I picked up a few of their dropped knives along the way. I saw my girlfriend's lantern up ahead, all shattered. I thought she fell. I got a closer look, ready to pick her up or do whatever I had to do, but she wasn't there. I collapsed and started losing my shit. I had my gun out, calling her name, but no response. Just that same horrifying screech. I was sitting there alone, listening and wondering what the hell to do. I wasn't sure if my friends got out alive or not. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to find out. I was almost ready to take my own life. At some point, I must have come to my senses because I told myself that I wasn't going to die in there. At this point, it was a battle. If anyone's going to get out, it's going to be me. I probably shouldn't have stuck around because it came after me again. This time, it came from the side. It tried to land a few feet in front of me, but I fired the gun 3 more times. This time, I know all 3 hit. It was screeching and writhing on the ground. I was too shaken to do anything, but it managed to fly back upwards in a few minutes. I decided to pop my only spare mag in and keep moving. This time, more cautiously. I wanted to shout out for my friends, but I didn't think it'd be a good idea. I kept thinking I heard them, but I thought that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I knew that the screeching sounded more and more angry each time. I hoped I had shot enough to kill it, or at least make it leave me alone. The tunnel started to get a little bit warmer and a little brighter, because I was almost at the end of the cave. I heard my friend call my name, and I managed to call his back. I was home free at this point. I got up there, and they were mostly okay. One friend broke his hand. My girl's friend got a minor concussion. Other than that, it was just scrapes and bruises. They said they heard my gunshots and didn't think I made it out. We got the injured people to Harborview ASAP. Afterwards, we debated whether or not to tell how it all happened, but none of us wanted to end up in a madhouse. We weren't sure if it was dead, and we weren't going to go back and find out either. That place is still somehow a tourist attraction. Before this, I had never heard anything about a giant man-bat hybrid thing. But I have read the old legends now, and I've also heard rumors since then of people seeing glowing eyes in there. So this happened way over 20 years ago. My father, who divorced my mother shortly after I was born, lived in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, a little town called Heber along the highway. It's gotten to be a lot bigger since way back in the 90s, but back in the day, it was little more than a post office, 2 bars, and a bunch of houses separated by good old Arizona pine trees. My father lived in a house that he prided himself on having built himself, and the lot rests at the edge of a small division of sparsely organized homes. Well, back then, the local contractor had been digging trenches way out into the woods by my father's home to accommodate future real estate. Well, the market for building new homes hadn't quite boomed in Heber yet, and most of these things were dug and left abandoned for years. That's where I, an adventurous kid, came in. A fun fact, too, these ditches are all roughly 9 to 10 or so feet deep, or were before they got put to use, and had steep sides unfit for climbing out of quickly. Another fact, most of these homes at this time are just summer or weekend places, and only a handful of people like my dad lived there full time. That meant that nobody else was ever really around. This is aside from the occasional older person on vacation. This meant that on those summer mornings during school vacation, I decided to just wander off into the woods with an only, "I'll be back soon," to my father. Nobody else was likely to be out there, especially aimlessly wandering about. Now these woods stretched out pretty far, and after maybe a football field, you can't hear a damn thing back at my dad's house, nothing short of a bomb or an air horn. Now the interesting bit is this. There's only so much you can do in the woods alone before you get bored. I had left both my Red Ryder BB gun back at his home and his machete, which I used to randomly hack at dead trees with, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a smile. So to entertain myself, I decided to try and get as close to one of these trenches as I could, and then back away before I fell in. Things went well for the first few. I would creep forward and leap back, easy enough, but this one in particular, dug on a steep incline overlooking a small valley, was particularly nasty. While the dirt near the edge gave way and I had gotten closer than I thought, and only thanks to the fact I had managed a firm grip on the edge before slipping down, did I manage to cushion myself enough to avoid breaking both my adolescent legs. So there I was, stuck at the bottom of a 10-foot trench with a hell of a climb waiting for me. But before I even managed to start, I looked up and was startled by the presence of someone or something that I didn't know. It was human, at least at first it appeared to be human. It had shoulders, or something that looked like shoulders, and a head that sat atop of it. It was early in the morning, and the sun hadn't fully come up yet, and the local scrub provided enough shadow on top of the darkness of being in a hole to make it hard to identify much. So me, being a naive kid that I was, pleaded for what I assumed was a neighbor out for a walk to help me out. What it replied with was a screech more fitting for a horror movie, a monster movie, or something like that. The noise was loud enough to cause me to cover my ears in some vain attempt to make it go away. By the time it stopped, I looked up again, and whatever it was still there, just staring down at me, a kid trapped. Each time I tried to talk or yell, it did the same thing. And after a while, I just broke down into sobbing and tears, hoping that whatever creature this was tormenting me would go away if I just didn't look at it. I cried and begged and cried and screamed for help, but nothing. The screeching broke my noise from time to time, and each time I looked up, it was there. Only after an hour of crying and totally hoarse did I finally look up to find that it was gone. So I scrambled like a squirrel on cocaine up the edge of the hole, only pausing to look when I managed to hit the top. There wasn't anything, not a trace, no birds or animals, nothing, just silence now. Needless to say, I booked it back home, only stopping when I was sobbing at my father's legs. I told my father what had happened. He went into the guest room that I stayed in and grabbed his father's old 4570 and took off into the woods at a hobble. He had broken his back and lost most of the soft tissue and cartilage in his knees from a motocross accident before I was born. But holy shit did he go flying. He came back an hour later, scolded me for lying. He told me not to go out into the woods without him again, or at least not without a gun, and he told me to watch my step better. To this day, I don't know what it was watching me down there. I asked around later, and nobody was staying in any home for roughly 4 homes in any direction, and anything further was likely empty as well. It freaked me out, and does to this day. I don't go out in the woods at all without a gun anymore, but that area is private property now, and they don't exactly like people with guns sneaking about, so I just stay away from it. So, if any of those encounters stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. If you have an encounter of your own, as always, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down there is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. And with that, I think I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully I'll sound a little bit better in the next one, so cross your fingers for that. And there also may have been a little bit of background noise in this because it was very cold in the room that I was recording this in. And so the noise that you may hear is that of a heater, but maybe it's there, maybe it's not, just letting you know. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me, and thank you for watching. Have a good week.